In the era of monarchy in various countries, there were a number of leaders who left controversial marks in history. In this discussion, we will explore the 5 most controversial monarchical leaders in the world. Every leader has roles and decisions that spark debate and invite a variety of opinions. From controversial policy decisions to actions that violate human rights, we'll dig deeper into them and evaluate their impact in historical context. Let's start exploring the world of controversial monarchists. The first, Queen Mary I of England, also known as Bloody Mary, was one of the most controversial monarchs in English history. She reigned from 1553 to 1558. Her controversial nickname refers to her violent campaign to restore Roman Catholicism as the official religion in England. One of the controversial actions taken by Queen Mary I was to take drastic steps to suppress Protestantism and restore Roman Catholicism as the dominant religion. By that time, England had experienced significant changes in state religion during the reign of her father, King Henry VIII, who founded the Anglican Church. Queen Mary I believed that Roman Catholicism was the only true religion, and she was determined to eradicate Protestantism from England. To achieve her goals, she passed laws that required people to adhere to Catholic teachings and practices. During her campaign, Queen Mary I took very harsh measures against those who opposed Catholicism. Thousands of Protestants, including religious figures, preachers, and ordinary people, were considered enemies of the state and were sentenced to death. Many of those sentenced to death were executed in cruel ways, such as being burned at the stake or strangled. This religious persecution resulted in many people fleeing England to seek refuge in the Protestant countries of Europe. Queen Mary I's religious persecution policies not only sparked debate in Britain, but also received international criticism. Many people feel that her policies contradict the principle of religious tolerance and violate human rights. Although Queen Mary I had a strong goal of protecting her religious beliefs, her acts of persecution caused her influence to be viewed negatively by many. As her reign ended, her policies began to be reviewed and examined more critically. Queen Mary I is a striking example of how a monarch can create controversy through actions that go against basic values such as tolerance, religious freedom and respect for human rights. Its history provides important lessons about the importance of respecting religious freedom and pluralism in a country. Next, we have King Louis XVI of France, who was the most controversial monarch in French history. He reigned from 1774 to 1792, and his reign spanned the period of the French Revolution, which changed the political and social face of the country. One of the main reasons for the controversy surrounding King Louis XVI was his inability to deal with the discontent of the French people and deal with the social changes that were taking place in that country. His government was marked by ineffective policies and was slow to deal with the problems facing his people. At the time King Louis XVI came to power, the French nation was facing a serious financial crisis. The state budget deficit and the heavy tax burden caused people's discontent to increase. Intellectual leaders such as the philosophers Voltaire and Jean-Jacques Rousseau punished the social and political injustices that existed in France at that time. The French Revolution began in 1789, with the French people angry and disillusioned by the injustices they had experienced. King Louis XVI and his family were eventually besieged at the Palace of Versailles by an angry mob. In 1792, France officially became a republic and the monarchy was abolished. Louis XVI and the Queen, Marie Antoinette, were arrested and tried for alleged accusations against the state. He was considered an irrelevant monarchical force and a target of public outcry. In January 1793, Louis XVI was sentenced to death by guillotine. Louis XVI's death sparked a reaction in France and Europe. For some, he is seen as a helpless victim of the events that swept France at that time. For others, Louis XVI's death symbolized the end of absolute monarchy in France and the beginning of a new era in the country's history. And of course next is Queen Marie Antoinette of France, the wife of the man we discussed earlier. Queen Marie Antoinette is a very controversial monarch. She ruled with her husband from 1774 to 1792, and she was in the public eye for her extravagant lifestyle and lack of concern for the social problems faced by the French people. Marie Antoinette was from Austria and became Queen of France after marrying Louis XVI at a relatively young age. She is best known for her interest in fashion, fun and entertainment. Her extravagant lifestyle, which included extravagant clothing, jewelry and events at the court of Versailles, was the subject of much attention and criticism from the poor and suffering French public. At that time, France was facing serious economic problems. Social injustice and unequal distribution of wealth have created discontent among the people. Unjust fiscal policies and a corrupt government increased the economic pressure on the French people, while Marie Antoinette and the court continued to spend state money on their luxurious lives. Marie Antoinette's attitude to social issues was also controversial. She was considered indifferent and uninterested in the suffering of the French people. When faced with the facts of poverty and hunger that hit her country, she is said to have issued a well-known but controversial statement, namely, "If they lack bread, why don't they eat cake?" This statement was considered to reflect Marie Antoinette's ignorance and reluctance to understand the real conditions of her people. I think it's not ignorance, but more arrogance and ridicule. Criticism of Marie Antoinette's lifestyle and lack of social empathy further soured her public image and led to further anger against the monarchy. When the French Revolution erupted in 1789, Marie Antoinette and her husband, King Louis XVI, were seen as symbols of injustice and extravagance that caused people suffering. Eventually, like her husband, Marie Antoinette was arrested and tried for treason against the state and sentenced to death by guillotine in 1793. The couple became a striking example of the failure of monarchical leaders to face up to the demands of the people and manage profound social change. The couple's reign and tragic end were a watershed moment in the history of the French Revolution and the creation of the French Republic. The last, and most controversial, King Leopold II of Belgium, who reigned from 1865 to 1909, was a highly controversial monarch. He was involved in the brutal violation of the Congo as a private colony, known as the Free Congo or Leopold's Congo. His actions and policies in the Congo had a dire impact on the local population. Under Leopold II's leadership, the Congo was seen as a source of abundant natural wealth. He encouraged the exploitation of Congo's natural resources, especially rubber and iron ore, for personal and economic benefit for Belgium. This exploitative practice takes place in an environment that is extremely cruel and without compassion. Congolese workers, including adults and children, were enslaved and forced to work in appalling conditions. They were forced to collect rubber by force and were subjected to terrible punishments if they did not meet set production quotas. The mutilation of hands or tails, killings, torture, and killings are common acts committed against the people of the Congo. Leopold II's policies also caused the deaths of millions of Congolese. Many natives died as a result of forced labor, hunger, disease and violence by the Belgian colonial forces punished by him. The exploitation of the Congo under Leopold II was one of the worst genocides in history, with estimates of the number of victims reaching several million. As reports of human rights abuses and atrocities in the Congo spread, international pressure on Leopold II increased. Human rights activists and journalists such as E.D. Morel and Roger Casement exposed the atrocities that occurred in the Congo and urged that action be taken to complete the restoration. In 1908, international pressure forced Leopold II to hand over control of the Congo to the Belgian government. The Congo colony later turned into the Belgian Congo and is still experiencing the challenges and consequences of the dark colonial period under Leopold II. Leopold II's role in the history of the Congo is a clear example of a monarch who was involved in crimes and exploited the people he led. Its cruel and brutal legacy in the Congo has left deep scars and serves as a stark reminder of the power abused in the context of colonialism.